So today I'm going to be talking to you about, the creation and the evolution of the parties in the United States. The two main parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, these are not the only parties. There's also the Green Party and the Libertarian Party. But, both these two parties are the most prominent ones, and they've been alternating power since, I think, Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln, or 1854, around that time. Anyway, so let's get started. Brief background. Everything started from the Democratic Republican Party. Yes, that is one party. And this party was the first opposition political party in American history. United States history. Well, it all began in 1792, as the Republican Party. So first it was just the Republican Party. And they really held power from 1801 to 1825. And then, let's get started. So first, under the Washington administration, which went from 1789 to 1797. So, the Federalists, they weren't a political party at this point, at the beginning, but they were just a group of people who they were really involved in the drafting of the Constitution of 1787. And this group of anti-federalists resisted the adoption of this new Constitution. Now, this all stemmed, and I'm not even joking, and this is actually true, it all stemmed from Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton. He was the person who was the reason why we have this bipartisan system, which, by the way, was hated by Washington. Washington hated and even warned against partisan fighting. And this really was Hamilton who caused the divide in American politics. It was all because of opposition to Hamilton's fiscal program. So in 1791, sorry about my neighbors, Hamilton and other pro-federalist politicians, formed this new Federalist Party, which was the first political party in the United States. They believed in a central government. Then there was another group of politicians at the time who supported an idea on states' rights, and these people rallied behind Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson and his supporters, they were really influenced, especially Jefferson, because he had even spent a lot of time in France, by the ideas of the French Renaissance and, of course, the French Revolution. It all started in 1789, although it went on for a while. The name, I mentioned how it was the Republican Party formed in 1792, and the name was actually chosen on purpose. It wasn't just a random one. Federalist was chosen because of the support of the federal government, but the Republican Party name was chosen because it was a clear opposition to any monarchical ideas, and many in the Republican Party believed that prominent members of the Federalist Party, such as Alexander Hamilton, put across a very monarchical ideology for the United States. Hamilton's monarchical ideology is, he really based a lot of his political beliefs in Britain, but that is subject for another video. The Republicans, they disliked aristocratic ideas, and, they thought the Federalists put way too much power in this central government. They thought, but the rich are getting richer at the extent of the expense of the poor, and that shouldn't happen. The rich, Wall Street, is taking advantage of those in need. The Federalists decided to mock them by saying, "Oh my God, you're not the Republican Party, you're the Democratic Republican Party," and try and link them to the to the French Revolution. The Federalists did this. The name ended up sticking, and in 1798, it was now the official name of the party. So now it was the Federalist Party versus the Democratic Republican Party. By this point, this is the Adams administration, 1798. In 1792, there was kind of a huge split between the two parties, with the Federalists supporting Britain. I know, kind of weird that the U.S. was supporting Britain. And the Democratic Republican Party by that point they were just the Republican Party. They supported France. And well, this hatred and opposition ended up, like, especially geared towards the Federalist Party, united the Republican Party well into the 1790s, and they even managed to fight against really like prominent acts, especially those which were under the influence of Federalists, like the Jay Treaty of 1794 and the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. So, well, the Democratic Republicans, by this point 1798, remember, they eventually got into power after the John Adams presidency, who, by the way, was a Federalist. Well, Jefferson, he was the most prominent Democratic Republican member. He was president from 1801 to 1809. Madison was president from 1809 to 1817, and, well, Monroe was president from 1817 to 1825, marking like those three people the main block of power the Democratic Republican Party had. Well, their foundations of the party was very anti-elitist. However, like the three people I've just named, they were all southern plantation farmers, like southern plantation owners who had slaves. So like they were aristocrats, but they were, oh my god, we hate aristocrats. Well, they did have a liberal political philosophy, kind of. And, well, in the election of 1800, the now infamous election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson narrowly beat John Adams and became new president, therefore commencing his presidency in 1801. Well, he, along with his fellow Democratic Republican presidents, so Madison and Monroe, they tried to scale back any like Federalist policies, but really only overturned just a few. I mean, mainly Bank of the United States, that was implemented by Hamilton and kind of based on the British, so that's important. But the only reason like this disappeared was because its charter expired in 1811, so it just disappeared. The Bank of New York, also founded by Hamilton, was still there, but the Bank of the United States disappeared because of this, because its charter expired, nothing else. Well, Jefferson, he was clever. He made the party appear more egalitarian and democratic. And he did this in several ways, going to his inauguration, I think the first one and maybe the second one, I'm not entirely sure. He walked to the Capitol rather than riding as Washington and Adams had done. And then also his the annual message to Congress was made via messenger rather than him saying it in person. Well, he also retired national debt and reduced the size of the national forces. However, there were some parts of foreign relations, especially that did require a more nationalist approach, most notably the Louisiana Purchase. So, now, things are all good and all, and by this point we have the Democratic Republican Party. But right now in the US, there's mainly the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, so how come this happened? And it all stemmed from this conflict between Jackson and Adams. Now, this is Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams. Well, by this point, the Democratic Republican Party, rather than being a strong political party that it had been, the way this is 1824. Before, it had been a strong political party to oppose the Federalists, but by this point, it was just like a loose coalition of people, of factions. And this election of 1824 caused and exposed the fissures and the breaks in the party. So the two main men were the leaders of the two major factions between the party, Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. They were both nominated for president. Two other people were also nominated, like William Crawford and Henry Clay, both also from the Democratic Republican Party. Well, Jackson did have the popular vote and even the plurality in the Electoral College. So all things pointed to Jackson having winning the presidency, but still it was way too tight, and they needed the vote to go to the House of Representatives. Well, Clay, I mentioned him, Henry Clay. He was the Speaker of the House, and it was fourth, so he had no he knew he was gonna win. So he withdrew his candidature, I think is the word, in favor of John Quincy Adams, therefore giving Adams the presidency. Now, well, Clay was named Secretary of State, but by this point the party was split between those who supported Jackson and those who supported Adams. People who supported Jackson were kind of pissed off because they thought Andrew Jackson should have won the presidency when, he was snubbed by the House of Representatives because Henry Clay was besties with John Quincy Adams. So it caused two political parties to rise. They just split because, Andrew Jackson didn't want to be associated with John Quincy Adams. And it was the National Republicans who were headed by Adams and Clay, and they would eventually evolve to become the Whig Party. And we're going to put that on hold until in a second because the Whig Party is coming back. I'm not going to talk about the evolution until the Whig Party because that's not really relevant, but anyway. And the second faction, led by Andrew Jackson and future President Martin Van Buren, were the Democratic Republicans. Yeah, they kept the same name. Martin Van Buren, by the way, he was president from 1837 to 1841. Well, they had many, Democratic Republicans, the new ones, had many policies with both local and humanitarian significance. And Jackson, he was elected, John Quincy Adams, he was only one-term president. Jackson was elected and was president from 1829 to 1837, so served 2 terms. And they just decided they didn't want the Republican label anymore. They were just, this is it, we're now the Democrats. The name was there, but they didn't really formally adopt the name until 1844, but they were now formally Democrats. And by the way, fun fact, both the donkey belonging to the Democratic Party and the elephant belonging to the Republican Party are now well-known symbols stemming from satirical cartoons in the 1860s. But I don't exactly know how the elephant stemmed, but the donkey stemmed from people and opponents calling Andrew Jackson a jackass. Jackass being also known as a male donkey, so hey, he adopted the symbol, and that's why nowadays the Democratic Party is a donkey. Anyway, so now the collapse of the Whigs. Now again, I'm not going to talk about the National Republicans into the Whig Party, because that's not really relevant, but there was a bill in 1854 called the Kansas-Nebraska Bill. This dissolved the terms of the Missouri Compromise. Now, the Missouri Compromise was extremely controversial in the U.S. because, it essentially divided the country in the issue of slavery, and now we see Missouri Compromise, I forget the year, it was the beginnings of the Civil War. You can trace it, you can trace it all the way back to, the slave trade, but in terms of policies that divided the country, it's the Missouri Compromise. Now, under the Kansas-Nebraska Bill, the slave or free status could be decided in territories by this new policy called popular sovereignty. Now, the Whig Party couldn't handle it and ended up collapsing. And along with those who were pro-slavery in the Democratic Party and those remaining in the Whig Party, they formed the new party, the Republican Party. And this was all decided in February, March 1854. And yeah, it was anti-slavery people who created the Republican Party. Now, I mentioned the issue of slavery, and I'm going to very briefly touch upon it how it influenced politics, not about the moral reasons and the ethical reasons. But, the issue of slavery was widely discussed in the 1850s, and Southern Democrats, they wanted an expansion. Northern Democrats wanted more settling on a local level and a popular referendum. and like Northern Democrats. Eventually, like they gained like the Republicans actually gained power, and in the North was more Republican, South was more Democrat. Well, Abraham Lincoln, he was from the Republican Party. He gained a lot of support and was elected president in 1860. Now, you may think, and I'm going to touch upon this, don't worry, but isn't a more liberal approach that of the Democratic Party today, and a more traditional conservative approach, a more like the Republican Party? But did you just say that it was the Republicans who were opposed to slavery and not the Democrats? Yes. At a certain point, and I'm going to talk about this, don't you worry, they kind of switched ideologies. So I'm going to talk about the Civil War and then get to that. So, the Civil War. It broke out in 1861 after Lincoln's inauguration, which was controversial enough. And by the way, today, as of April 14th, marks, today in 1865 was the day John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln in the head, who died in the next day, April 15th. Just thought you might like to know. But anyway, 7 southern states, democratically led, formed the Confederate States of America in hopes of gaining independence from the United States. Well, the Union eventually did win the war. I'm not going to get into the Civil War right now, that's another video. But, well, the Confederacy ended up being dissolved. And it is now many Republicans who wish for the Confederacy to be returned. Well, slavery was, there's a debate as to whether the Civil War was about slavery, about states' rights. It was essentially slavery. Yes, it was slavery. Well, Republicans were the ones to oppose slavery, and nowadays we would think it would be the Democrats who oppose slavery, but no, it's the Republicans. And well, everything culminated ended in Lincoln, with Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, briefly before his death. Well, the majority of the South of the U.S. was Protestant, was the Democrats, and they upheld really traditional conservative beliefs. And they were more, agrarian and anti-big businesses. These traditionalist values were present. More traditional, going back to the land, more nationalist. The North, however, was Republican, and they fought for civil rights and voting rights for African Americans, especially. Well, you can talk about that in a second. Yeah, and well, I mentioned from Lincoln's presidency to the presidency of FDR, the party switched. And at first, when I was first told this, I panicked, how come they switched? No. I always thought of the Democratic Party being more liberal and the Republican Party being more traditionalist. So when I was researching this, it was really interesting. So, a change in ideology. Well, the Republican Party became more and more interested in economic growth and more interested in supporting big businesses because, as you can probably remember, because I've just said it, the Democrats were more anti-big businesses. Well, this was especially the Republican Party really flourished economically in the financial and federal expansions of the 1860s and the 1890s. Well, there was discontent and its politics they wanted to support, so they implemented social policies to try and gain support, essentially. However, the Democrats, they held on to these social policies. They held on to economic aid. The Republicans, they started switching to a more hands-off approach, both to the economy and to the government in general. Yes, they were more we'll let you do your thing. The Democrats were okay, the state will guide you. That's it. So more, social policies, and that's the Democrats. Well, the Republicans, they enjoyed quite a lot of financial success. This is up until the Wall Street crash of 1929, when the world, especially the American economy, just collapsed. Well, many blamed Republican President Herbert Hoover. The previous president had also been Republican, and the previous one had also been Republican. The previous one to that had been Democrat, Wilson, But I mean, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover had been Republican. They had a very hands-off approach to the economy. Well, the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression and the poor handling was attributed to Hoover. So here comes FDR promising social change and improvement of the economy, and hence, well, he was voted in president. He implemented the New Deal, which had enormous amounts of progressive social and economic policies like guaranteeing social security and minimum wage, which are more of what we associate with the Democratic Party nowadays. Well, traditional conservative Democrats didn't like FDR's policies, so they said, yeah, we actually like the Republican Party better, so we're kind of going to go to that. Because, yeah, I know that one was more liberal before, but now the Democrats are even more liberal, so we're going to go to that. So the Republican Party became more and more traditionalist and conservative. Now, many in the Republican Party were like, we don't like how this party is becoming something very traditionalist and conservative. And we actually like Truman's, who was from the Democratic Party after FDR's death. We actually like his progressive social policies better. So more liberal attitudes moved to the Democratic Party. And that has stayed the same. The Democrats largely held power in America up until Reagan, and then they've been kind of switching. So yeah, that is the evolution of the Democratic and Republican political parties in the US. I mean, it all stems from the Democratic Republican Party, which stems from the Federalist Party, which essentially stems from Jefferson and Hamilton not getting along. I mean, every problem in America can essentially be traced to Jefferson and Hamilton not getting along. I mean, even slavery. Anyway, I mean, not entirely, but like the Civil War and the issue of slavery in terms of politics, not the social aspect. So that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to say, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.